Well, welcome back to the Black Doctors Talk podcast. I am your host, Dr. Christopher Holmes, and a member of the Black Doctoral Network. Today, I am joined by Dr. Chezare Warren, who is the Associate Professor of Equity and Inclusion in Education Policy at Vanderbilt University's Peabody College of Education and Human Development. Dr. Warren is an award-winning researcher. He is the recipient of numerous national recognitions for his scholarship, including the 2018 AERA's Teaching and Teacher Education Early Career Award and a Critics' Choice Book Award from the American Educational Studies Association for his book, Urban Preparation: Young Black Men Moving from Chicago's South Side to Success in Higher Education. A 2019 Ford Foundation Postdoctoral Fellow, Dr. Warren's scholarship has been published in top peer-reviewed journals, including Educational Researcher, Journal of Teacher Education, Urban Education, and Teachers College Record. I am so excited to talk to this man of excellence. With so many writings and experiences under his belt to share with us today, I'm elated to have this conversation with Dr. Warren. Welcome, Dr. Chezare Warren.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is such an honor for me to talk with somebody, of course, who is in the field that I love so much, and that is the field of education. So let's start by asking the first question, which is, where does this all begin for you?
Where does it all begin for me? I think it just begins in childhood, without giving you my entire life story and biography, but I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. From a very young age, I have just had an affinity for the project of teaching and learning, being in conversation with young people and creating space for knowledge exchange has just always been an exciting prospect. And so for as long as I can remember, that is the sort of singular goal that I've had in my life. Right into and through college, even though I was getting some pushback and some resistance around my wanting to be a teacher, in part because of how much we don't respect the work of teaching in this country. Folks were just like, you're really smart, you shouldn't be a teacher. And I thought, but I think you're supposed to be smart to be a teacher. I think that's precisely who you want to be a teacher. And so I pursued teaching and realized very quickly I really enjoyed teaching. I did not enjoy being a teacher. Those things are mutually exclusive. And I've been on a journey, at least in the last decade, of trying to understand teaching and learning, particularly with respect to Black children and Black boys, from the perspective of it as a human enterprise. And what does it mean to invest ourselves in the project of teaching and learning with the premise that we're working with human beings. And so, yeah, I'll sort of stop there, but that's the abbreviated version.
So there were no teachers in your family?
No teachers in my family, nobody in education in my family. I'm the first generation on my mother's side. My father did go to college. He was a social worker. So public service is in my family for sure. My father was a social worker, and then he spent 26 years as a Chicago police officer.
That was my next question, because oftentimes people that become teachers, even if they don't have teachers in their family, there's somebody that in their family they have seen serve. Because that's the work that we do. We serve as teachers. You have to have a service heart as a teacher. So here's my next question. I love the fact that you said you love teaching, but you didn't love being a teacher. I'm sure that's going to resonate with a lot of people. When you were teaching, though, at what point did you realize there's a problem in education?
Immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a Black man who, my first job, and I don't mind naming them either, my first job was at a KIPP school on the west side of Chicago, in one of those neighborhoods in Chicago that people see on the news that's like Chirac, and I hate that I don't use that language to describe my city. But it's, it was a economically disenfranchised community where poverty was concentrated and it was racially segregated. And so all of the problems that go along with structural disinvestments in Black communities, that community represented. And this school exists in that community to help kids climb the mountain to college. Yeah. 100% Black kids with almost a 100% white woman and white faculty and administrative team. And then there was me as a 7th grade math teacher in this space that was inherently violent in a lot of ways for how they mishandle Black kids, and thought the best way to get them disciplined is to break them down and then indoctrinate them around behavior that was really a model of social control, that then they could be on the path to college because they needed to develop certain habits, pro-social habits. And I knew then something was fundamentally not right. Even as I was driven in part with similar logic around, I want to help save Black kids from themselves and from these communities. So my logic wasn't all the way different, in part because I was educated in the same places as my white colleagues. But I also knew as a Black person, I didn't think it was appropriate to be yelling at a 10-year-old until they fell apart crying on the ground.
Yeah.
That was the motto. Put them in a room, line them up around the wall, and then yell at them until they break down, and then teach them the language of KIP and the KIP way. Be nice, work hard. And so I knew then something was wrong. And then as I progressed in my career, I just had more and more questions about what the work was and what it needed to be, and how it needed to look at the level of our philosophy, and how it is that we read the Black body as a sort of precondition for then the decisions that we made as educators.
Oh, great answer. And it makes me want to ask you this. So with you probably being one or very few Black men in that building, why did you feel that leaving was the answer when they so needed somebody like you to make them feel safe and comfortable?
Well, in that job, I was asked to leave. So I was not cutting the mustard. And one day, this story is like borderline traumatic, but I mostly healed from it. I was the only faculty member of color, only Black faculty member, only male Black person teaching, and everybody else was white people or white women mostly. Wow. And I was a 7th-grade math teacher and went home for Thanksgiving break, came back, and was called into an assembly with all the staff, all the students and families, parents, and the principal said, we are reorganizing the faculty, the faculty assignments. This is after Thanksgiving in the middle of the second quarter. So-and-so, the 6th-grade reading teacher is now going to be the 5th-grade math teacher, and the 5th-grade math teacher is now going to be the 6th-grade language arts, social studies teacher. And then the dean of students is now going to be the 7th-grade math teacher. Wait a minute. I'm the 7th-grade math teacher. So what's my assignment? He gets to my name. The 7th-grade math teacher is now going to be the assistant to the 7th-grade math teacher. So in front of an entire school of students, families, parents, my colleagues, the only Black member of the faculty, and one of 2 professional Black roles. And when I say professional, I'm just talking about like professional staff, counselors, social workers, faculty, administrators. There's only 2 of us. Any other Black person you saw in the school was a secretary or a custodian. Very important roles. I don't say that to diminish those roles. My point is there's an authority that came with my assignment that I no longer had, and I learned of it at the same time that the kids did. Wow. In front of everybody. And it was such a demoralizing experience. And so that was like a Monday. And then by Friday, I was called in and asked to leave. And I felt like one of the children of Israel being let go out of Egypt. Pharaoh had released me, and I was so happy about it. And the next Monday I interviewed at a school in Chicago Public Schools. And the following Monday I started as the 8th-grade self-contained teacher. So in that particular instance, I was pushed out. There have been a few other instances in my career where I was pushed out because I was questioning and pushing on the institution to do better by Black kids. And then at a certain point, it became clear to me that if I want to stay in education, I needed to not do it inside the classroom. I needed to do it in another position. So then I became an administrator and I got a license to become a school principal, and I became an instructional coach, and I loved that work. And the only reason I stopped doing that work is because I felt very compelled to pursue an academic career in higher education as a scholar. So that's the only reason why I left being on the ground. But my last role was the role that I felt the most empowered and the most impactful, because I got to move to turnaround elementary schools and, supervise a group of teachers and coach them and work with kids and do pull out and co-teach. And it was the perfect mix of classroom work, engagement with students and teachers, but also being able to protect myself in some ways from the forms of bureaucracy that sort of sucked the life out of the work that I was doing as a classroom teacher.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Coach, been there, done that. Some of the best work you'll ever do. Because it's work that truly makes a difference, right? So let's move forward. So you decided to leave public education and you decided to then embark upon the doctorate. What I want to focus on, while you were in the program, what did you learn about yourself and your purpose?
Ooh. Well, I just have to say, one of the things I learned was that I enjoy teaching. I didn't enjoy being a teacher. I started to develop a framework and a language for the sort of dissonance I was experiencing, because I went to grad school at night and was working full time during the day throughout the entire program. And I tell my students who are fully funded at Vanderbilt, Michigan State, I had the privilege of being a fully funded student, fully invested in my learning. I had dual identity, work all day and go to class in the evening and study all night. But that was really important to me because I started to notice the chasms, and as a result, started to renegotiate my relationship to the discipline. And what I learned was that I have always loved learning. I have never loved school. But because I'm an academic and I've always done school well, and I think people read me in a way that's like, of course, you learn how to do school, then you automatically love school. I've never loved school. I've always been a middle of the road student. I was never a super high achiever. I did enough to be recognized as, really to be unbothered by adults. But I never really invested myself. And school was not that hard to me because there are a lot of people who just didn't believe that Black kids was going to do anything. So they didn't work that hard to make us earn our grades or whatever it was. So I just feel like I coasted a lot. So by the time I got to graduate school, I knew there were issues I had questions about how school worked. But the thing that I think I really discovered about myself was that I really have just always loved knowledge and truly being a lifelong learner. But that did not translate to, I'm going to one day be a professor. I didn't think I would actually finish the program. So if you can imagine, I start the program, working full time. I enjoy going to class until I didn't. And then reading those books and doing the learning and the conversations and acquiring knowledge and language for what it was I was saying, what microaggressions and self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm like learning all of these theoretical frameworks. I'm like, now this makes sense. And now this makes sense. And I was enlivened by that. And then in 2010, I did my very first conference presentation. It's just amazing how much can happen in 10 years, 12 years, as I think about that. But I remember distinctly University of Akron Black Male Summit doing a presentation on the importance of building relationships with Black boys. And it was like 90 people in a room, and I was shook. And I was like, what am I about to say? I mean, I knew what I was going to say, but I'm like, I don't know that this is going to be something that people care about.
Yeah.
And I just poured my heart on the table and had a standing ovation at the end. And that was when it clicked, like, I'm supposed to do this. This is a space that I'm supposed to occupy. But I still didn't believe it for another year and a half. And then I defended my dissertation proposal. And the 5 PhDs around the table said, okay, you can be a doctor if you do what you said you're going to do in this proposal. And I was like, word? And then I got a postdoc at an Ivy League institution that I hadn't even ever heard of. And that was it. I was like, I got a job. I'm a candidate. I guess I should really give this thing a try.
Why not?
But that was what it was in graduate school.
I love the fact, as you talk about your journey, there are still factors of the unknown. I still hear fear.
Oh yeah.
But what I do also hear is this level of confidence in yourself and this spirit of resilience. Like, I'm just going to see this through the end.
Well, there were certain moments along the way, and I'm a man of faith. And so I believe there are conversations and seeds that are planted that are supposed to just keep moving you along. Because I don't think I was that confident. And the thing that I was really unsure about was this whole thought, will people find credible what I have to say? I've always had an insecurity around my voice. And, I'm a singer, and I always think, oh, everybody sings better than me. Like everybody's smarter than me. They're more articulate than me. It's always been this thing about my voice and using my voice and exercising use of my intellect that I have always had an insecurity about. But there's also a part of me that is also like, you just need to try. You just need to do it. The only reason I pursued a PhD, I was going to drop out of the master's program when I was a master's student. First class in, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna drop out of this. This is too much work. I'm working full time and I'm going to class at night. This is crazy. My instructor, a white man, stopped class, took me into the hallway because I said this out loud in front of the class. I'm like, this is my last class, everybody. I'm just going. This was fun, but I'm out. He literally was like, meet me in the hallway. Pulled me out of class. He said, Chezare, you absolutely cannot stop this program. You're a brilliant thinker. You're an excellent writer. He was like, and I think you could even get a PhD. And in that moment, I was like, you think I can get a PhD? He's like, absolutely. That's a word seed. 2 years later, I applied to a PhD program. 6 years later, I completed the PhD. But I literally held on to that word. And that word, and I didn't know he was a man of faith. Years later, I ended up seeing him at my church. And I was like, oh, this man was ministering to me is what he was doing.
Yeah.
But that was the thing I held on to. So I think along the journey, where I've lacked confidence, faith has always found its way to sort of substitute. And it's been enough, just enough in the right season and moment for me to take a step, because faith is activated in our doing, not just in our sitting and in our thinking. It's in our doing.
Yeah. But isn't that incredible though? The one thing that you were insecure about is the one thing where your power lies.
That is elevating. Absolutely. The contradiction is astounding, but that's a God thing. It's always in the contradiction where the best work happens.
Yeah. So that's a word from somebody right there. That one thing where you are struggling, that's the one thing that's going to be used to elevate you to the next level.
For sure.
But as you said, you got to have faith.
Yeah.
You got to have faith. So you get the doctorate. How proud are you at this moment?
You know what? Finishing graduate school was anticlimactic. Like you defend your dissertation, they call you doctor for the first time. You're like, really?
Who? Me?
Okay. But from then till now, it's been a journey of celebrating, appreciating, and being present in my successes. I think I finished graduate school and my immediate thought was, well, one, I wanted to sleep and just like chill. But the other thought was, okay, now I got to turn this dissertation into papers.
Yeah.
And it took me a really long time to stop and learn to appreciate and be present in my own life. It was just do this, finish that, do this, finish that, do this. And that's dangerous for lots of reasons. But that part of things has been a journey. So I probably appreciate having a PhD now more than I ever did then. At that time, it was a thing that I knew I worked hard to do and I earned it. And my big thing was, don't have people calling you doctor and you don't know nothing.
Yeah.
So more important and impressive to me was, do I know the answers to whatever questions you're asking me about the expertise I say that I have?
Yeah.
That's impressive to me.
Yeah.
And similarly, I'm impressed by people who know what they're talking about, not by the titles or the institutions that they, where they work. And then more generally speaking, it's been really important to me just not to be impressed, because I do not ever want to believe my own hype. So I've just had a discipline of trying to like keep myself close to the ground, but also allowing people to appreciate me and to celebrate me and to appreciate the journey and what God has done for me in my life. That's the space of gratitude, is more the space than like, let me just be excited and celebrate that I've been able to do all of these things. I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity and that I've invested myself to trust myself to do my work. And
yeah, because at the end of the day, why you got in the field itself hadn't changed. You're still here to serve. Period. You're just serving in a different capacity now. You're able to reach more people, which I think is very powerful. Also, for somebody that's watching this, for those that are practitioners, those that are called to lead, stepping out of the classroom, stepping out of the field, whether you're a principal or a teacher or a coach, if you really believe that you've been called to have impact, imagine what happens when you can leave that one building and serve people that serve buildings. That's serving the greater good. But that takes a level of faith and risk taking to just take the first step to do it. And so I love the fact of the work that you're doing right now. I focus mainly on the work of school improvement, but after years of doing this work, I realized school improvement work is equity work. Because that's how they've kind of gotten into the labels of being identified as low performing schools. So I want you to talk about, number one, we're going to get into some of your writings, because that connects back to your research. So let's talk about Urban Preparation, that book, that critically acclaimed book, that award-winning book. What were you thinking when that book came to your mind?
So that book has a really long story. It's a journey all in of itself. But the one thing is, the book, it needed to, what am I trying to say? I needed to tell the story in book length.
Yeah.
In education, we're what would they call an articles field. So you're writing more articles than you are writing books, especially pre-tenure. But I knew that story needed to be told in book length, in part because there were so many intricacies and there was so much analysis for understanding a Black boy's journey into and through college, and particularly Black boys who had come from a school that had from day one received so much critical so much press and notoriety, and hadn't yet to demonstrate their worth as an academic institution. Yeah. And the book questions how it is that we care so much that Black boys are in shirts and ties and short haircuts, but not care. We care what's on their head, but not in it. Like the school just did so much to create an image, but had not demonstrated evidence that they were really doing a good job of preparing Black boys to actually thrive in college. Getting accepted is not the same thing as completing college, persisting, being retained in, or even enrolling. Yeah. But they have hung their hat on 100% Black boys get accepted to college. It's urban prep in Chicago. And so I was a founding math teacher at that particular school, and moved through the ranks and got a PhD, and ended up working on a project with my former colleague from the institution, who had also finished his PhD, to just understand from the boys' first person perspectives what this school meant to their journeys, and generally speaking, what their journeys were like going, being from the South Side of Chicago, going to urban prep, and then getting into and finishing college. So that story, an article could not contain that story.
Yeah.
It needs to be told in a book.
And I love that you also wrote that book, because oftentimes, as researchers, we read each other's stuff, but when you put it in book length, it can get in the hands of people who normally won't go
That's
to
right.
those types of journals, right?
That's right.
Because that story needed to be told. And so the compelling storytelling, the narrative of Black boys and the importance of identity, of support, of that safe space, as you like talking about, right, is so important that we don't see for young Black boys, honestly, in public education. And when I listen to you tell the story about Kip, it breaks my heart, because it's what I see so often, because we want to contain, control young Black boys, because there is a fear that if we give them the tools they need to be successful, their power is undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we encourage more places to fight for inclusion, to support all students' identity, but in this case, we're talking about African-American boys, and giving them a voice?
How do we encourage people to fight for Black boys and give them a voice?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a hard question that I think it takes a career to answer. And even then, there are a lot of folks who've been trying to answer that question. Part of where I am in my life and in my career and my thinking on this issue is been to start to interrogate ourselves and how we've come to understand the world, and in particular, Black people, the concept or notion of Blackness, and disentangling ourselves from the forms of anti-Blackness that we've all inherited and been impacted by, as a necessary precursor to any sort of effort aimed at school improvement, transformation, reform, whatever the language is going to be for how it is that we create spaces that better serve and respond to the needs of Black children and Black boys. I think that that's the work. The work is us. We're the work. We need to be thinking with texts and folks who are going to challenge us to continue to grow our understanding of race and racism and sexism and homophobia, and all of the ways that we are all sort of interwoven into various hierarchies of oppression, both as the privileged and the disadvantaged. All of us, regardless of who you are, have an identity that is likely in one degree or another privileged and on another degree disadvantaged. And we have to start to think about that at the intersection. And I think part of the work, we tend to understand Black boys and Black men as disadvantaged on the race side, but not on the gender side. And part of what I also want to invite is for us to think about the intersection of race, gender, class, for both how Black men and boys have been socialized to be patriarchal and to be heterosexist and to be tough and to be emotionless and hypersexual. This is part and parcel of the ways that we're socialized, and we enact violence on Black women and genderqueer people. Black men reinforce heteropatriarchy on Black boys. I've sort of written about that in the book and in some other work. We need to think more expansively about Black boyhood, and then recognize our relationship to various forms of oppression for how we sustain or disrupt it. And part of that is thinking with intersectional perspectives and lenses. So I think that that's an important piece, the us part of things. And I think as we wrestle with that, then we can get some glimpses of what we need to be doing different. And the other thing that I'll say is that youth teach us how we should be handling them, and we should pay attention. When they refuse us, when they refuse the environments that we've created for them, it is not because they're deviant and defiant. Perhaps they are being resistant to test the waters, yes, because they're young people. But I think we should also read that behavior as their invitation to us to rethink our relationship to them and their relationship to the institution and the institution's relationship to their communities. That resistance is evidence that the environment is not working for whatever reason. So it can't always be that we're forcing them to adjust. We have to adjust.
Yeah. I love what you're saying. I mean, you just really, brother, you're dropping them. You're dropping gems, and I'm loving it. And I just hear you speaking from your heart. But what you're saying is we have to do a better, or we need a deeper evaluation of humanity. Because if we're going to talk about the work of inclusion, we truly have to understand the diversity of humanity that exists on the earth. And I think you hit on so many aspects of diversity that I don't think that most people, especially in education, really have come to terms with, because we really like to see students in a very linear way, which is why I think why we get the outcomes that we do, because we're not serving to meet the needs of all these various identities, right? We're teaching to a level that's comfortable to us from our own experiences, our classism, our sexism, our gender, our own identities. And so thank you for saying everything that you said. The next thing I want to talk about is this, because when you said we have to deal, it starts with us. The us that I want to talk about is the African-American community. If we're going to fight for Black boys, then that belief in Blackness has to start at home. It has to start in the community. And one of the spaces where we don't see a lot of family and parent engagement is in schools from Black families. What is your perspective on advocating or having parents, number one, be present in schools and making sure they advocate for their children, for their boys, for their girls, to ensure they're being seen? Because if they're not being seen and being included in schools, and we can go through policies, we can go through discipline plans, and we can see if Black students are being seen or not. So how do we get the community, how do we get parents more engaged to fight for our students?
I think part of this is expanding our conception of what fighting for our students look like. For some parents, fighting for their students is making sure that they even get to the building.
Yeah.
That needs to count.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of, we got to expand our paradigm of engagement. And there's a lot of research out there. I'm not super versed in that literature, but there's a lot of research that sort of differentiates engagement from involvement, and how it is that we should think about that differently for Black parents as opposed to other parents, and the types of structural challenges and barriers Black parents have to being what folks might describe as good parents or productive parents to their children. I think we just need to consider more holistically the various social forces that prevent parents from being present. Because what I believe wholeheartedly is that very few parents give birth to their children or have a part in making a child, and then they want their child to fail and be unsuccessful. If we just start to believe that every parent is doing their best, even when our frameworks of their best is not, doesn't suggest that they are, we might approach thinking about our work with them just differently, because we don't believe that they're being purposely negligent. So I think that that's part of just giving people the benefit of the doubt. The other piece is, and again, this is anecdotal, I don't like to talk about stuff that's not my lane, so I encourage people to read Jada Moultrie and Rima Reynolds and Karen Mapp and other people who do work on Black parents and Black parent engagement, Stuart Green, that we need to think about how we're going and reaching them where they are versus always wanting them to come where we are. I think is a piece that's important. What would it mean, for example, to know a lot of the parents go to the same Black church in the community? Yeah. Can we go have our grade report meetings on a Sunday morning? That feels unorthodox, maybe. Yeah. But if that's where parents are, let's go to where they are. Yeah. You know? Yeah. It costs us a little more, but the impact can be really, really great when we think about the ROI, right? So
yeah. There you go. If we're attempting to meet students where they are, why can't we meet parents where they are if we say we truly want their support? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that offering. I know I stressed you a little bit there, right? Like you said, that's not.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
What's funny is my last job, well, one of my last jobs in Chicago Public Schools, I was an instructional coach at a turnaround school in the South Side. We were floating the idea we were recognizing, obviously we had literacy goals. We wanted the students obviously to improve in their reading, but we also recognized that part of the challenge is their parents are not readers. Instead of paying all of this money to some organization, probably mostly white people, to come in and do after school work, what if we train parents, taught them how to read, taught them some literacy, some comprehension skills, and then train them to teach their children in the after school program? We're paying them, we're giving them a skill set, but we're also helping them to support us and support their students in the space between home and school, right? At home, continuing the lessons that they're learning in school. And I don't think they ever got that off the ground, but I'm like, that's a brilliant idea to me for a stay-at-home mother to provide some childcare, give her some skills that she needs for her own life, that's going to improve her life. Also, then pay her, then hire her to work her own children and her children's friends. And then, like this, I feel like that's closing a loop.
Yeah.
Where are those solutions?
Yeah.
Where are they at? Who's
Yeah.
documenting them? Those are the types of solutions I think could be powerful.
See, now we can have a whole nother conversation when I start talking about federal funding and how we can really use those funds in ways that are equitable, right? So we're not even gonna go down that lane because we'll be here for a whole nother hour.
Right.
I want to talk about this. So imagine I'm a college student. I've enrolled in Vanderbilt. I'm going to be in your class. What will be my experience? And as I sit under the powerful knowledge of Dr. Warren.
Oh, geez. Hopefully you find some deep humility. While I know a lot of things, I don't assume I know very much at all. My disposition as a teacher is that I know some things, but you know a lot of things too, and together we can know a lot more. Yeah. And I want to learn and be challenged by my students as much as I'm hoping to challenge them. And I do have an intention on challenging my students. And when I was a student teacher, I taught in 6th grade math class, and I'll never forget I'm going to say her name, Miss Ashby, white woman. Let's assume that she's well-meaning. But one day she pulled me to the side and she said, "Mr. Warren, you're using words that the kids don't understand. You need to bring it down." And my response to her was, perhaps I just need to teach them what these words are so that they can come up. Why do I need to bring it down?
Wow.
And I think of that as the same way as a professor. My students this semester in my critical race theory class is like, this is a lot of reading. I don't know what these words mean. That's what the thesaurus is for. That's our dictionary. That's what Google is for. Y'all know how to use the internet. That's why you raise questions, you highlight, and you bring some of that to class. So you can always expect that I'm not going to give you all the answers. I'm going to give you a lot of content, and I'm going to say, handle that content. And then we're going to come to class and you're going to raise your questions. And then I'm going to point out what I think is important in the content, but I want you to engage with the content. I'm not going to give you a framework for navigating the content because I don't want you to shortchange yourself on the opportunity to learn. That's huge to me. And so anybody who's taken my class, I think they are always astounded by the breadth of knowledge and information and things that we cover, but also the flexibility and adaptability of the classroom space in terms of what is important for what we learn, week to week. So
yeah, I can definitely feel that those students, when they leave you, they leave with a new sense of the topics. They leave I can't say well informed, right? Because it's just a semester, but they leave more informed than they were when they got there. And I know that you challenged them. I can feel it. Whether it's the way you're speaking so elevated or the text that you're engaging them in, it's definitely going to expand their minds, their thinking, and opportunities for what they're thinking their own research is, right? And that's the purpose of this work. What keeps you motivated? in this work?
The one thing that's occurring to me is embracing my multi-dimensionality, recognizing and calling myself by the right name. I'm a multi-hyphenate, not being ashamed of the fact that I sing, I write songs, I write books, I write articles, I speak, I like laughing, I watch Real Housewives of Atlanta. I do a lot of things, and I do not need to apologize for doing all of those things. And that the thing that um threads me together and I have a deep abiding love for Blackness and Black people, and that anchors pretty much all of my activities, and wanting to make sure that I live a life that is completely poured out is important to me. Am I doing all I can to show up for people, to recognize and honor my own well-being, while showing up for people, and then to just sort of give and pour out my gifts and talents? They're gifts because they are meant to be given away, and I want to recognize that what I have that they are gifts. So that's what motivates me. I just want to leave the earth having no regrets, having done everything that I was supposed to do.
Let me ask you this question, because you definitely have a service heart. And so you use the verbiage of pouring out. What do you, Dr. do? What do you do, Dr. Warren, to pour back in? How do you fill yourself back up?
I think the pandemic was really productive and helpful to me. I got counseling, got language for why I have certain dysfunctions. And part of filling myself back up is just learning myself and loving the parts of myself that for so long I found to be unsavory. It's been cultivating an intention to see myself and to recognize my triggers and know how to handle myself with a lot of care. Has been a really important piece. And then discerning who is for me and who is not, and making sure that I recognize that everybody does not deserve my time, and that I want to spend time with the people who want to spend time with me, and making it a priority to invest in relationships who are investing in me. And doing that is important. And then knowing when to just sit down and to say no, and to rest, and not apologizing for watching TV or going to brunch. Like, these are all things that make for a full life, and I want to continue to have a full life. So I just invest in the things that bring me joy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the pandemic changed a lot of things for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
But a lot of reflection occurred, and I think some people actually did come out better.
Yeah, for
I really
sure.
do. What's next for you? I mean, what do you see yourself going in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? What do you want to do?
That's really a hard question. Some years ago, I stopped doing 5-10 year plans because I'm like, life don't work like that.
I know I heard you say live present, right?
Yeah, I just, I'm a Mary stan. They say I'm walking, put one foot in front of the other. Like, that's really my thing. I'm continuing to explore. I have a lot of entrepreneurial desire, vision, social impact, working arts and entertainment. I'm imagining how I can fold in all of these other aspects of myself and they not be compartmentalized. I have an EP. I might as well go ahead and plug the music.
Let's do it.
Chezare Augustus on all the social media platforms, but ChezareWarren.com. Eventually, this music is going to come out. I have a show in Madison, Wisconsin next month. So putting myself out there musically, meeting people in Nashville. I'm really excited about the possibilities for the ways that I can do music. That's always been a love, but I have always made it tertiary, or like not a priority to me. So there's that. There's this work I'm doing on Black possibility, centering possibility, empiricizing these concepts and going and trying to understand it. So there's my academic work. my professional work in terms of promotion to full professor in the next couple of years, and continuing on my academic track, but also again just building my networks and exploring. All the world is so big and there's so much. The best way to describe it is unflattening myself. I think to get a PhD and to pursue an academic career for a Black person who didn't have many role models on the journey, has been learning how not to essentialize myself. There are enough social forces in the world attempting to narrate who and what I should be in the world, and I get to author my journey. And I have a broadening imagination, and I want to exercise full use of it as I write the future.
Wow. I had a very visual moment just then when you said not to flatten yourself. Now, number one, let me say, brother, you can do everything that's in your heart. You can do it. And I asked you that question about where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, because you are a man of faith. And I know every person of faith also has vision, because he gives it to us. So I knew you had an answer. I knew you had an answer. But when I heard you say you didn't want to flatten yourself, and what I saw then was you living not just a rounded life, but a life that's also filled, right? This life is filled and supported, that keeps you rounded at all aspects, at all points of all the things that you do. And so that is my prayer for you, that you continue to live an unflattened yet full and rounded life that has peace and joy and happiness until this thing expires. And then your legacy, because it was so full, people can still feel it and experience it, and still learn from Dr. Warren because of the great work that he's done. You mentioned the word also, your network. And so let's talk about Black Doctoral Network and your relationship with us. We're so excited to be connected with people like you. You are the prime example of why we exist, why we continue to try to grow and bring in more people. So talk a little bit about BDN and your appreciation for what the network does.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a Facebook conversation where Maurice Green was imagining this network, and what it meant, the sort of notion of collective impact, and what it means to put a bunch of Black people in the room who are on parallel journeys toward terminal degrees, and how we might support one another and learn from one another interdisciplinarily. And too often, when you're becoming a doctor, you develop an expertise in a particular lane and you're isolated from people who don't do what you do. And so this space is really important for pulling people at multiple stages of their professional and academic journeys, now from undergraduate all the way up into and through folks who are luminaries in their fields, and putting us in the same room and putting us in conversation, I think is incredibly powerful. And there's so much more work we can do together than and collectively than we do in isolation. This doctor journey breeds isolation. Yeah. So I think the BDN has been really important for like just pulling folks together in a room around a common mission and common purpose of support and love for Black people, and being excellent. I mean, BDN, if Black excellence was a organization, it would be BDN. So I'm so proud of Maurice and Deandra and all the folks who continue to grow this network and this organization. It's incredible.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for joining in on this conversation. I heard you say that you also want to be very particular about who you spent your time with. So I want to say thank you for taking time out and spending some of that time with me. This has been a true pleasure, Dr. Warren. Will you please tell our viewers and listeners where they can go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Sure. www.C as in cat, H as in hat, E, Z as in zebra, ARE, Warren.com, ChezareWarren.com. You can get access to my socials, but on Instagram, Twitter, Chezare Augustus. My stage name, my artist name is Augustus, which is my middle name. I publish with Chezare A. Warren. The A stands for Augustus. So you can look me up. I'm not hard to find on the internet.
I love it. I love it. Well, guys, you heard it there. Go follow this Black man of excellence. He is multi-talented, and go follow him. Check out some of his work. Check out some of his writings, his research. He's doing a lot. So there's a lot for you to do. So you just take some time and go and dabble into each part of all of the facets of this incredible brother. And while you're out checking out Dr. Warren, don't forget to also check out the Black Doctoral Network as well. We would love to connect with you on all of our social media platforms. Well, guys, that's it. It again has been a true pleasure. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this episode of the Black Doctor Talk podcast. I'm Dr. Holmes. I'm signing off, but I'll be back again with, of course, another amazing guest for you guys to learn and grow from. Until then, thank you so much. Please like, share, subscribe, and go and tell somebody. Like, I'll tell your pastor, tell your friends, tell your mama, tell your daddies, tell somebody about the Black Doctoral Network. Until then, guys, be safe. Peace out.